What'd you get kicked out of the house, Jay?
Christopher, did you see us waving to you on Sunday? We rode right by your house.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. We did one down to the Delta and then came back around Babel Slough and West Sac. Nice ride.
That sounded like a good ride.
It was. It was.
Good morning, Chair Cabaldon. Just to let you know, we do have a quorum present whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you.
It is only 9:58.
So not exactly whenever we're ready.
Well, just want to make sure that you knew the time.
All right, thanks.
No problem.
Hey, Christopher.
Yes, sir.
This is Don. I just want to thank our SACOG team for putting this program together. This was very well prepared for. I thought the announcements about how to log into this Zoom meeting were exceptional, much better than most, and I feel very prepared thanks to the effort that people put in getting ready for it.
That's great. Good job, Jessica.
Thanks for those kind words, Mr. Saylor.
Chair Cabaldon, Director Harris is going to be a little bit late. Wanted me to let you know. And Jessica, Director Veerkamp, is trying to figure out how to participate by phone. If there's any way you can help him on that, that would be great.
Thanks, James. We're on it.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to stay on as long as I can.
Right, drive safe.
Thanks.
Clearly, we need better transit options to Elk Grove.
Exactly.
Well, if he were a Davis City Councilman, he'd be driving on a bicycle, which would be even harder. So
I could ride a train.
Yeah. All right, the hour of 10 a.m. having arrived, why don't we call to order the Thursday, August 6th meeting of the Transportation Committee for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a flag? All right, then if you join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Lee, would you please call the roll?
Yes, absolutely. Just real quick, I just want to remind people that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on SACOG's YouTube. All presentations or handouts provided at this meeting can be found on SACOG's website. For members of the public who wish to make a comment, you can notify us by pressing *9 if you're participating telephonically, or by selecting raise hand if participating by computer. To the committee members, just want to remind you to continue muting yourselves when you're not speaking. And please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're phoning in to alert the chair when you're ready to speak. Okay, we're ready for roll call. Please prepare to answer when I call your name. Director Harris? Absent. Director Joyner?
Here.
Thank you. Director Peters?
Here.
Thank you. Director Samayoa?
Present.
Thank you. Director Sander?
Here.
Thank you. Director Saylor?
Here?
Thank you. Director Chenier?
Here.
Director Slowey?
Here.
Director Veerkamp, we're still trying to get him connected. So he's absent right now. Vice Chair Jennings? Absent. Vice Chair Soon?
Here.
Thank you. Chair Cabalden?
Here, and Vice Chair Jennings is also here.
He is. Thank you for that.
He is here and has learned how to unmute his computer.
Yeah,
No problem.
It's Director Jennings.
Technological whiz.
Director Jennings' very first Zoom meeting, so.
And ex officio member Benapol?
Present.
Thank you.
All right, so quorum is present, and so we'll proceed then to public communications. This is the time for any person who wishes to address the committee on an item that is not on the agenda, but within the Transportation Committee's jurisdiction and scope. Madam Clerk, do we have any public communications this morning on this item?
Yes, it looks like 2 people have their hands raised. I also have received public comment that I'll read after we hear those raising their hand. One is Jeffrey Tardikia. Would you like me to allow him to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, Jeffrey, you are free to give us your public comment.
I thank you. I believe the written comment is directed, which is the conundrum, is it is partly on your agenda in that your last item says that you are meeting September 3rd, and in your calendar, you're suggesting August 31st. Possibly it's because it's Labor Day weekend, but that's half of my public comment. The other one I will offer is a sort of kudos and thank you. Regional Transit at 65th Street has had a construction project going on, and Sunday they tore out the, shall we say, the entire 67th Street. I don't know that they've yet responded about Alameda and Sac State, but they had to change the pedestrian area to simply using the pedestrian corner sidewalk to allow light rail and bus service to be provided. They have made some adjustments, and it's rather clever if you get the opportunity to see what they hopefully have come up with to accommodate construction going on right next to light rail and buses. My public comment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next comment, Ms. Lee?
Yes, it looks like we have someone who's calling in. I'm going to allow him to talk just now. If you could please state your name, that would be great. Thank you. Okay,
Right, so-
caller.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Director Veerkamp. I was just calling in to make sure that *9 works, so I don't have a comment on the item.
Thanks. Glad to have you.
Okay.
Okay, I have a public comment that I can read. If you give me one moment to pull it up. This public comment is from Dan Ellison, a member of the public. Mr. Ellison says, I am disappointed to again not see any information about the regional bike share program on the Transportation Committee agenda. I know from staff of other partners that negotiations are going on with Lime about the bike share program, yet SACOG has not made any information available to the public. This means that it is likely the public is being intentionally excluded from the opportunity to express ideas and concerns about the bike share program. Many people in the region consider that the sudden withdrawal of bike share under under the excuse of the pandemic means that the design of the program with little to no leverage by public agencies in the privately operated system shows the previous design was a failure and the program must be revised. So far as I can tell, SACOG either does not see the need for revision or intends to revise without public input. That concludes his comment.
All right, are those all of the public comments, Ms. Lee?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you very much. Then with that, we will adjourn as the Transportation Committee for SACOG briefly in order to convene as the Capital Valley Regional Service Authority for Freeways and Expressways Committee. And so we will substitute the roll call from the Transportation Committee and ask Ms. Lee to call the roll for those additional members who are members of the SAFE Committee.
Absolutely. Director Nancy Nguyen, I'm sorry, Director Nancy Young.
I'm combined there, Nancy Young, I'm present.
Thank you.
That would have been a blockbuster announcement though.
And Director Chuck Nguyen.
Present, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, then we have before the SAFE Committee our consent agenda, which is just item 1, the minutes from the June 4th meeting. Are there any questions or comments or revisions to the minutes?
I'm happy to move the item.
Second.
All right, that's been moved by Director Chenier and seconded by Director Young. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Director Harris, please indicate your vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Harris is absent. Director Joyner?
Yes.
Director Peters?
Yes.
Director Samayoa?
Aye.
Director Sander?
Yes.
Director Saylor?
Aye.
Director Chenier?
Aye.
Director Slowey?
Aye.
Director Veerkamp? Director Veerkamp?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Vice Chair Jennings?
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon? Vice Chair Soon?
He's temporarily out of the meeting.
Oh, okay. We'll circle back to him. Chair Cabalden?
Yes. All right, so that motion carries. So next up we have item 2, which is the contract renewal for the 511 StarNet operations and maintenance and open data hub. Ms. Abraham?
I would like to say yes, and Director Nguyen didn't get a chance to since this is our safe item.
Yes.
Apologies about that.
No
Director
problem.
and Director Nguyen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now it really passes. So now we will move to item 2. So Ms. Abraham, thanks Director Young for clarifying.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Binu Abraham. I am the Intelligent Transportation System Program Manager. And the recommendation before you today is that the committee recommend that the CVR Safe Board authorize the Executive Director to execute a sole source contract with Castle Rock Associates for 3 years for an amount not to exceed $1,495,000 with 2 optional 1-year extension afterwards. Just to provide a little bit of background, we have been in contract with Castle Rock since 2008 for our 511 and StarNet program. The 511 is a front face which gives a traveler information, but the real work and effort is put into the StarNet portion, which is the real-time data exchange between different member agencies in the SACOG region. So the staff can see what's happening on their neighboring jurisdictions and react accordingly to the traffic demands. So it took Castle Rock about 3 to 4 years to build the system because there's no vendor that provides a ready package. It has to be customized for each individual agencies. And we decided to go with Castle Rock because at the time there was a federal pool study called CARS group, and there were 15 states that were involved in this project. We joined that effort because it helped us to keep our cost down because all these modules and softwares that were built was divided, the funding was divided among all the states. Now we have finished building the platform, and since 2015, we've been going into maintenance and operation. I have reached out to our member agencies, and almost all the member agencies feel very strongly that they put in a lot of effort and work into building the system to this far, and to go with a different vendor would be a lot more work and staff time that they do not have at this point. So we are recommending that we go into a sole source contract with Castle Rock at this time. I'm open to any questions.
All right, are there questions for staff on this item? Not seeing any, so is there a motion then on the item?
This is a.
Oh, no, go ahead. Someone had a question.
Go ahead with the question before I was going to make a motion. Just Director Nguyen.
Okay. Director Young, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. So then the motion's by Director Nguyen and the second by Director Young?
That's fine. Thank you.
Oh, all right. On the item, seeing no further question or discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Director Harris, still absent? Oh,
No, he's here now.
he got it. Director Joyner,
Aye.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Samayoa,
Aye.
Director Sander,
Aye.
Director Saylor,
Aye.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Slowey,
Aye.
Director Veerkamp, Director Veerkamp. Okay, we'll come back to him. Vice Chair Jennings,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon. Vice Chair Soon is absent right now. Chair Cabaldon.
Aye.
I'm back.
And Vice Chair Soon is here too. Yeah.
Okay. Chair Soon, how do you vote on item 2 for CVR Safe?
I'm going to abstain because I just joined back in. Sorry.
Sounds good. Director Nguyen
Yes.
and Director Young.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, then that motion carries. Mr. Corliss, do we have any other matters in the CVR Safe today? There are no other agenda items.
Thank you.
Okay, so with no other business then to come before the CVR Safe Committee, then this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you very much, Director Young and Director Nguyen, for making the trip up the highway again today. Appreciate it. And,
Thank you.
So with that, then we'll adjourn the CVR Safe and reconvene as the SACOG Transportation Committee and proceed to the consent agenda at the Transportation Committee, which is items 1 through 5. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any member wishes to remove from the consent agenda or at this time? All right, seeing none, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Saylor moves approval.
Jennings seconds.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and thanks for the name identifications for the big help to the clerk. If there's no further question or discussion on this, then Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the consent agenda, which is items 1 through 5.
Absolutely, and thanks again for that. Director Harris,
Yes.
Director Joyner,
Aye.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Samayoa,
Aye.
Director Sander,
Aye.
Director Saylor,
Aye.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Slowey,
Aye.
Director Veerkamp.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Jennings,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair Cabaldon,
Aye.
thank you.
All right, so that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us into item 6, which is the SACTRAC project database contract. Mr. Caceres.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jose Luis Caceres. I manage the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program and project delivery. I'm here with a recommendation before you, which is that the committee recommend that the board authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Econeractive. That would be for 3 years, plus the option to extend the contract 2 additional years for a not to exceed budget, 5-year budget of $519,000. I'm going to go over the who, what, and why of the contract, but before I do that, I'm going to share my screen, which I'm not excellent at doing. I'll get there. Well, let's try this. Okay. This is the I Street Bridge. Not if you can see it. The I Street Bridge replacement project for most is going to be a beautiful connection between the city of Sacramento and West Sacramento. For me and those on my team, it's also a record in our SACTRAC database. It is SAC 24683. It has 17 versions. It was last updated July 31st, and Jesse Gothen from the city of Sacramento is the contact. Just recently, we did an administrative modification to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, the MTIP, to advance 11 million of the board's RSTP that was out in 2025 up to 2020 so that the city can continue moving forward on design while the bridge program is strapped for cash. We did all these changes. Actually, the city was able to do these changes online from their cell phone, and SACOG was able to review these changes and accept them using our laptops during the telework process. And we've had this set up for 15 years of being able to do these sorts of changes to transportation projects. And that's the benefit of the SACTRAC database. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the database. The database has 600 projects and $4 billion of transportation funds. And we rely on this database all the time. I'm in it every day. We use it. We update our projects every month, and we adopt the whole new MTIP list every 2 years. For this, we need a database that is dynamic, flexible, reliable, and convenient. That's what SACTRAC is. We've had this contract with Econeractive since 2005, when together with SACOG staff, we designed SACTRAC. It's a much better improvement over what we had before. Since 2005, it's become a model for the rest of the state, and it's become a model for the rest of the country. Currently, we pay $74,000 a year for the service that Econeractive provides to house and operate the SACTRAC database for us. This proposal would take that average per year amount up to $103,000 per year. The reason why we like this database and why we're contracting with Econeractive is because this database service provided by Econeractive is dynamic, reliable, flexible, and convenient. That's the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions. Sorry, as a reminder, the action is that we recommend a 3-year contract with the option for 2 additional years for a total of $519,000. And sorry, with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, are there questions for staff on this item? I have one. So Jose, the main danger in sole source contracting or extensions of sole source without competitive bidding and what have you, and you've made the case, the substantive case about why you're proposing to do that in this case, is that you get trapped in a relationship that you have very little bargaining power or leverage in terms of price. So I'm wondering if you could describe and this has a schedule of price increases over time. Could you give us describe sort of how we're assuring that we have as much power in this relationship to keep costs down as they do, in terms of, since we're dependent now on this system, that we still have the ability to assure that we're paying a fair and good price?
Yes. So a couple of things. So the fair and good price, our control, and the system. So the fair and good price is, you see in there the acronym CMAS, and I don't know if the city of West Sacramento has used this. The state has already vetted Econeractive and many IT providers verifying that the service they provide is competitive and a good price. And the amount that we're proposing of $100,000 a year, that is a competitive and good price verified by the state, and it's actually less than other regions our size are paying in the United States and in California. Part of this is we're spokespeople for Econeractive. Everywhere I go, I tell them how much I love this database. And since we've been partners from the beginning, we're actually getting a pretty good deal. I would say an excellent deal compared to what other regions pay. If we had to do this in-house, I don't think we could do as good of a job, and I don't think we could do it as affordably as the service we're getting. Now, so that the question is, the power dynamic. It's only 3 years. We could spend the last of those 3 years going out and really hitting the street looking for a better, cheaper database if we wanted. We've done this several times over the last 15 years. And each time we find that Eco-Interactive, we designed it with them. It is a solid database. There's few competitors out there that can offer an equivalent service and product. So in some ways, we wouldn't really want to go out looking for something else. We're really satisfied with this. But if we did, it's just 3 years away, and we're not trapped into this contract.
Okay, very good. All right, I don't see any other hands raised or mics on or anything else that indicate there's other questions or discussion on this item. So is there a motion on item 6?
I'll move it. This is Chenier.
Sailor, second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. This doesn't feel like it. Usually at SACOG, there's like 500 people making the motion right away. Maybe because Tom Shallard's not on this committee. But, okay, thank you, Director Chenier and Director Saylor. Seeing no further discussion on the item, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on item 6?
Yes. Director Harris?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Joyner?
Aye.
Director Peters?
Aye.
Director Samayoa?
Aye.
Director Sander?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Saylor?
Aye.
Director Chenier?
Aye.
Director Slowey?
Aye.
Director Veerkamp?
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Jennings?
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon?
Aye.
Chair Cabaldon?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us then to item 7, which is the 2020 Regional Funding Round Policy Framework. And I just, as we're going to this item, I want to also acknowledge, I'm just looking at our screen, just the enormous amount of time and energy and thought and hours that certainly our staff have put into this work over the last several meetings and months. But also just looking at our Zoom screen, I know how many directors from all around the region have engaged very heavily in this topic and trying to come up with creative ideas and solutions to vet out alternatives and to think through some of the implications and consequences. So just to say thank you to everybody who's put so much into the effort on outreach and consultation and just good thought work over the last several months to bring us to this point. So, Executive Director or CEO Corliss, are you ready to take up the item?
I'm going to kick this off, Chair Cabaldon. As my wife, who's the former journalist, often says, don't bury the lead. And so working with many of you over the last couple of months, I just want to state up front a little bit about the background around this proposal you have in front of you today. I know there's great interest. I hope you've had a chance to see attachment C, in which we have laid out all of the engagement and the feedback and comments and ideas and proposals that have been put forth, but then in particular around the Public Works proposal that was put forward a couple of months ago. I want to say very clearly that proposal we have deliberated, discussed, and have tried to meet the spirit, if not in many ways, some of the actual very specific ideas in there. Some of you have asked for sort of a risk analysis, and many of you have asked in the staff recommendation, well then, why is there not a formula? Since that was what was on the table and still is by some of our public works agencies. So again, in the attachment, but I wanted to lay out for you again up front the reasoning and the rationale. It isn't because we simply wanted to dismiss that idea. It's because we do believe there's a lot of risk inherent going down that road of a formula. As we state, it is complex, it's complicated. We have over 30 sponsoring agencies. Certainly in practice and my own professional experience, be wary of the criteria that are used in the formula. I know many folks have floated a sort of existing population, which is hard to do, by the way, just on transportation, because none of your residents stay within their own community. So how do we evaluate an I-5 project or a transit project? And importantly, how do we really understand fairness and understand a regional system? And I know from some of you, there's even interest in things like using the regional housing needs allocation. Those in some ways, when you get into a formula, become very complicated and in some ways obscure really what's going on and trying to get the biggest bang for the buck. Second, we've talked quite a bit about meeting our MTP-SCS goals for the region. That 19% is critical, but we also have very strong expectations from our state and federal partners on those funding sources. We are skirting through that 19% target, as you know, like a freighter under the Bay Bridge at low tide. And even now, as we have an application right in front of the state for SB1 funds, if we don't meet that target, we don't get funds. We get cut off. We do believe that if we go down the road of a formula, it's going to hurt a little bit of our ability to compete for some of the funds at the state and federal level. And finally, and I know I've talked to some of you about this, more recently, and we've given you in writing, the Federal Highway Administration for the federal side of these funds, it's the federal side, has really not looked well upon metropolitan regions sub-allocating dollars by formula. We've given you an example from Chicago. It's there in writing. Again, I think where I see that heading puts us in a bit of a risky position. That said, and I want to be very clear about this, we have tried to incorporate the spirit and the intent of the certainty I think we hear that many public works agencies want, especially in this economic climate and this budget climate. And so with that spirit, some of which has been, I think, articulated in the consultation and the project ranking and the proposal, I want to hand it over to Matt Carpenter and Garrett Bellagrosa. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, James, and good morning, Chair Cabalda and members of the committee. Just step back and just a little offer context for the item today. As many of you know, over the last 15 years, we've had competitive funding rounds, occur every 2 or 3 years, and these funds, have had a great deal of impact on implementing projects across our region. We are, recommending to have a framework that will allow us to select projects for funding that include road, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian projects. And our funding programs focus on the 4-county region, the ones we'll be describing today. That's Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties, because the flexible funds that we program here at SACOG, similarly, our partners at the El Dorado County Transportation Commission and the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency make funding decisions in their respective counties. What we've seen over these months is board direction, external stakeholder input, and our staff analysis has really focused on 3 topic areas. The engagement over the first part of 2020. Investment priorities, re-looking at those, application process refinements, and potential project selection process changes. The policy framework, which is really the focus of today, is what you see in attachment A. And it's organized around these 3 areas to help you kind of guide you about what are we seeing in terms of both what's the key core elements and what's different from before. The focus, again, of our presentation is really on the overall policy framework. That is attachment A if you want to follow along to what Garrett and I present. Attachment B that will be projected on the screen, please, Robert. This is a table you are seeing that it offers a summary of the key programs that make up the funding round. Attachment C, as James just described, is a detailed summary of input received and staff comments. And please note that since the time that was published and shared with you, we do have 2 additional comments that are provided to you. One is from the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, or GSEC, and the other is from the Sacramento Metro Chamber. And finally, we have attachment D, and this is a preliminary draft of guidelines for our largest program, the regional program. I know it's a lot of material, but we really want it to be thorough in our documentation. And please, again, keep in mind that our recommended action today is really on the overall policy framework. Those draft guidelines, which go into considerable detail, will get refined through further work with your staffs and other stakeholders in the coming weeks. And we anticipate will be ready to be part of an application and a call for projects by October 1st. So we have time to still work through the details, but we really need your direction today on this overall framework. I also just want to make sure up front to mention that our work with stakeholders will also include draft guidelines for a couple of other programs you'll only hear a little bit about today, and that's the community design program and some very important work that's starting in one of the early efforts is related to a disadvantaged communities pipeline projects. And finally, you'll hear a little bit about a draft budget in the next item, and that's the budget for this funding round, and it's an information item for today. So we'll describe that after we go through kind of the cornerstones or the key elements of the policy framework. Now, in terms of investment priorities in this framework, our first goal, and we started talking about this, had a really good discussion through our May board cycle. We discussed 5 kind of specific areas, and we really appreciate the direction we got during that discussion. These 5 areas in investment priorities, the key one is making sure that we can continue to meet our regional policy commitments. One of those, and James kind of mentioned this, is meeting federal and state performance objectives and policy goals. This includes everything from a road safety performance metric to making sure we're staying on track to reduce our per capita greenhouse gas emissions. We also know that very closely related to that is positioning our region for competitive state and federal funds. Aligning, what we've seen over time is that aligning our performance outcomes in our funding programs to those same performance requirements at the federal and state level has really paid off for SACOG capturing competitive dollars. We've just had a lot of success as a region and SACOG individually for state transportation grants in recent years. We also are really committed in this policy framework to maintaining excellence in our regional project delivery record. You heard Jose Luis Caceres describe a little bit of our work with a database tool that's essential for our work with partners. And as a result of this strong coordination with our local agencies, we continue to be a very top state leader on this, securing more than $20 million of new federal funds obligation authority that we wouldn't have had if we weren't so successful. We really want to continue the success, and so our policy framework really emphasizes project readiness and active delivery coordination with sponsors. Closely related to the idea of meeting requirements, and this connects to something James mentioned, that we are really committed to implementing policies and meet kind of the goals from our long-range plan, the MTP-SCS. What we've seen in the past, and we see in this funding round, is that we're recommending to really maintain an emphasis on some fix-it-first system maintenance needs, and also making sure that other new policy priorities can be reflected. One of those policy priorities, both in our plan and it's really a subject of a new board working group, is around making sure that we can support disadvantaged communities. The board working group that Chair Frerichs launched in June about race, equity, and inclusion is really right now on a parallel track offering us input on this funding round. And you'll hear a bit more about that as we go into more detail. So as we step back and we looked at other goals that we really wanted to achieve, we described what the strategies to achieve that second goal about investing in both large and small projects. We have a region of very diverse needs. And to reflect that, this framework separates the regional program into 2 categories. These are the 2 categories you see on the left 2 columns of the table we have on the screen. So, and the first of those categories we call transformative. And this is for all system expansion projects and for larger non-expansion projects. And larger projects in our framework are those project requests that are 5 million or greater. And a clear threshold or a criteria for these projects is that they must demonstrate some significant regional benefit. The challenge with these projects, of course, is that they're larger, more expensive, and take longer to implement, but they also have big benefits. And those are benefits we can measure with more confidence through our data and tools. What you'll see in the framework is that we're recommending 3 selection criteria that are important. First is obviously demonstrating the performance benefit from the investment. Second is looking at cost effectiveness, just basically, are you getting a good bang for the buck? And then finally, how ready is that agency to deliver the project? What we hope to achieve in that transformative category is to be able to offer more larger one-time funding awards. For any veterans on the committee, you may recall that for at least 10 years, our funding rounds have really emphasized project awards less than 5 million, but this new category will not have that limitation. And we also hope an outcome from this will be incentivizing our project sponsors to initiate those important longer term projects that have benefit. In a time of great risk, we know that that's harder than ever, but we really hope that by supporting, well, a policy commitment, a limited number, excuse me, of non-expansion projects, we can really help sponsors move those projects forward. And now just to clarify, multi-year commitment in our discussion, the policy framework really means that a project will continue to be getting funds more than the 2 years out when we expect the next funding round to occur. What that means is in 2020, we'll expect to have another funding round in 2022. But these projects that are if the board endorses these projects, they would basically have a certain guarantee that they would be matched with dollars to get to a certain stage of implementation. Examples in our region could include a longer complete streets project or a farm to market rural corridor with safety improvements. What would be similar about both is that these might connect multiple jurisdictions and they just would have a bigger impact than if they were a smaller project. The second category we have is called maintenance and modernization. And this is for non-expansion projects only. And it's also for those projects that are under a request, under 5 million in request. These are solely focused on the management and condition of our existing transportation assets. And so this is a program that's perfect for many of our needs related to road maintenance and for replacing transit vehicles. While these projects do have some risks, they have fewer implementation risks because they're smaller, but they also have localized performance benefits typically, and they're harder to measure with data and tools. Because of that, we make sure our selection criteria very much looks to the expertise of our local agency partners in one of the criteria. These criteria also include asset condition and use. As I mentioned, the local agency priorities are important. And then also it's very important to make sure that there's some bang for the buck with making sure there's some good modernization features. And when we say modernization, what we mean are really important enhancements that could be like a safety improvement, or it could be something that helps be more multimodal to support transit, walking and biking, or freight. These key objectives we hope to achieve, our outcomes, is that we hope with this program category, the maintenance modernization, we'll get a pipeline of smaller projects that can be implemented relatively quickly to boost the economy. As you all went through earlier in 2019 and the early part of this year, sometimes a thing like an air quality rule can cause a lot of problems and risk to projects moving forward. All of these projects would be exempt from that complicated regional air quality analysis. So they would just be a stream of projects that would keep our delivery going and really help, we hope, boost our economy. We obviously see this also supporting and continuing that our long range plans focus on fix it first, or getting our transportation assets in a better condition. And we also see real opportunities here to link to that new working group, that board working group about providing better benefits to disadvantaged communities. And we do hope, finally, it's very important that we hope in this category, and we believe the framework will support this, is it can provide a little bit more certainty for project sponsors. The consultation process that Garrett will describe in a bit more detail is a key way to match local agency capital improvement programs and maintenance programs to our regional funding. We really hope that because these priorities will become a top consideration for our staff award recommendations, that we can help our sponsors as they struggle with this tough time of great risk with funding. A third goal that we have in terms of the policy framework that's supported by specific recommendations is to support more place-based planning and some pre-construction project development work. This goal is largely achieved through our 2 place-based programs, and these are the programs you see described in the 2 right columns. They're unique in that, and what distinguishes them from a project-based focus is that they combine land use and transportation strategies in very specific targeted areas. We have 3 focus areas for these place-based programs. One things we really want to make sure we are achieving is accelerating infill and providing cleaner transportation options. We see a great synergy between linking our new Green Means Go initiative with the longstanding community design program. And this, one of the real opportunities by connecting strategies from Green Means Go to community design is bringing in perhaps additional state economic recovery funds, as well as private investments that can make even more impact out of our community design program. We also hope that these strategies that we have will incentivize more agencies to plan and deliver projects for the future. Very similar to what I mentioned earlier, we really recognize that it's important to keep a pipeline of projects that are moving along so that they can be connected with dollars to construct. One of the issues is that we're offering larger project development awards. This means that sometimes a project in the past, we've seen projects that have been broken up into phases or segments, and they've almost had to go back into environmental more than once. We want to have more large project development awards that would reduce that need to phase or segment the delivery of a project. And we also, another key element in the framework is increasing the non-competitive grants in the community design program. These are those grants that historically have been up to $100,000 for a member agency that chooses not to put their hat in the ring for a bigger award. But by going from $100,000 to $500,000 and supporting eligible planning studies and technical project development activities, we believe that pipeline of projects will be even stronger. And then finally, but certainly not least, we really want to make sure that this helps us increase our focus of investments and engagement in disadvantaged communities. As I mentioned, that new board working group we have on race, equity, and inclusion is working right now to help us fine tune some of these recommendations. But we do have some strategies in the policy framework that are already recommended. I consider these kind of early commitments. One is to fund $3 million in guaranteed grants to all member agencies in the 4-county area. This will help planning efforts, kind of a bottoms-up process to really engage with disadvantaged communities in every part of the region. And then second of all, to provide local match waivers for some project applications for those projects that are in targeted disadvantaged communities. We hope this really helps. And there'll be additional strategies discussed as part of the work, and we'll come back for board consideration in September. And fourth overall goal in the draft policy framework then is to help our local agencies win competitive grants and keep project implementation efforts on schedule. We've really seen this a challenge right now, especially as economic risks mount. This is supported both by this advanced consultation phase, really working closely with your staffs as well as other project sponsors to make sure we understand what is their needs over the next period of time and doing our best to try to match that to our funding opportunities, and also introducing 3 new tools to help in meeting this outcome. One of these we call the Revolving Local Match Fund. And with this, we're offering a strategic amount of regional funding to help our local agencies compete better for federal and state grants. We believe this could really help increase their competitiveness in a state that we're often against, the Bay Area and LA, which are sitting oftentimes on lots of local dollars. A similar program in intent is our project funding gaps. And this program provides strategic funding to cover sometimes these relatively small but very important unexpected budget gaps. We hope this will help keep a project schedule on track. And so this would be similar, but similar to the match fund, we really see one of the challenges obviously is that there's a lot of demand there. So you'll see that in the criteria, some opportunities, some needs to kind of manage that demand because there's only going to be so much available funds. And then finally, a program that's really an expanded program from what we've offered in prior cycles. We're now calling the Rural Urban Connections Federal Funds Exchange. And this program, which has been longstanding and in the past was just focused on helping rural counties, and rural counties in our region, the 4-county regions are Yolo, Sutter, and Yuba. By adding additional funds into this program, it will be very important because it will also help us reach out and involve small communities. And what this does is by taking funding that was federal and turning it local, it allows sponsors to implement projects sooner and with fewer delivery complications. So with that, you get kind of a framework of what are our program elements. Now I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, and he's going to describe some very important process changes that we also think are a key part of our policy framework to make this all be implemented successfully. Garrett?
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. As you alluded to, in the framework, we have some process ideas that complement the investment priority ideas that Matt just spoke to. These process ideas really center on the application and the project selection elements of the round. The attachment A does describe these in greater depth. I'll be brief and just sort of hit on some of the key highlights that we wanted to bring to attention to the committee. First, as part of the 2020 round, we are recommending an advanced consultation phase between SACOG and project sponsors. And in this advanced consultation, the project sponsor will really move forward in sharing their investment needs and priorities over the next several years. We could bring the project performance assessment data we have at the regional level, and in companion with the sponsor's own evidence and analysis, provide input on the performance benefits and competitiveness of the projects in relation to the program goals and objectives that the board adopts for the various programs that Matt just spoke to. As part of that advanced consultation, we will ask sponsors to rank or prioritize their own internal applications. Local priorities has been a key theme of what we've heard in the feedback to date, so this ranking will help provide greater clarity. And as Matt spoke to, we recommend this sponsor's own ranking to be a selection criteria in the maintenance and modernization program. And then continuing the efforts we've initiated in the 2018 and 2019 round, further streamlining efforts, Program consolidation, we're recommending consolidating the Green Region program into the core regional program, builds off of the consolidation work we did in 2018. Further steps to simplify the application, fewer exhibits, shorter sort of narrative-based questions, and then coupled with that, the work we've done on our data tool, which we call the Project Performance Assessment Tool, which really minimizes the amount of data that the own project sponsor needs to bring to the application. And in this 2020 round, we've gone through an update to the tool, had an open testing period for all users, and have even offered to run the data component for any sponsor that so wishes. So those are ideas that we've put forward in the proposal on the application streamlining side. To close out the third theme that Matt spoke to, it's the project selection. In the framework, we've recommended the opportunity to broaden participation on the regional program working group, while importantly maintaining the existing conflict of interest guidelines that we have. And then finally, to offer an interview stage to applicants after the review, which is something that came up in the feedback. So to close out, we've put forward this proposal today. It's really the culmination of months of thought and engagement and deliberation. As James alluded to up front, we are very appreciative of all of those that participated in providing their thoughts and feedback, and there were a good many that did. It was clear that there was a lot of thought that went into those feedback. And as those put their thoughts into it, we likewise thought very critically about the ideas we heard, in particular, thinking through those ideas in relation to the regional policy commitments that this committee and its prior iterations have put forward on the SACOG funding round. So what we've put forward in the proposal today, we believe preserves the performance-based nature of the SACOG round while also incorporating some really important new ideas around application streamlining, more certainty for project sponsors, and revisions around shared investment priorities. And we are asking the Transportation Committee this morning to recommend this framework for adoption to the full board. So we'll pause there, unless there's anything else that James or Matt wants to add. We wanted to be brief because we anticipate as well a good number of public comments and community members wanting to weigh in on this item.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you to the whole staff team. I know others have been partnering with the two of you and the CEO as well internally. So why don't we proceed first with questions from members of the committee? Just questions at this point. No, we're not yet at the declaration stages, but just questions, and then we'll proceed to take the public comments and then return to the committee for its discussion and deliberation. So first, are there questions for Matt or Garrett or the staff?
Mr. Chairman, this is Saylor. I have a couple of short questions.
Go ahead, Director Saylor. Thank you.
So my first question is about the RUCs of exchange, and I'm just a little unclear how that works. What is the functioning of that program?
Yes, Director Saylor, historically, the way this works is this is a partnership with Caltrans. Caltrans does this as it is a program opportunity for regional transportation planning agencies across the state. And what they essentially do is, as you may know, the federal funds that come, they actually come originally from DC, right? They come to the state. And then what Caltrans does is they have basically washed some amount because they manage both flexible STIP funds and with these federal grants. So they basically create some local funds. They then send back to counties. We have the opportunity though to offer more policies. In the past, this has gone directly from Caltrans. I mean, we're in the loop, but they offer it directly to counties, including yours, Yolo County, Yuba County, and Sutter County, their public works agencies, to help them. Because obviously these are agencies that don't manage a great deal of locally derived revenues. So this is a huge part of being able to deliver projects. What we're proposing in this framework is to scale that up. And basically by offering $400,000 of additional funds, a program that was we last supported at the $1.1 million level, will go to a $1.5 million level. And by doing so, we hope to be able to bring in some of the smaller communities in the region, you know, as well as just making sure that we can continue to do the important work we've been doing with the counties such as yours to make sure that they get these funds that are a critical part of their budget.
Or do they replace the match requirements, or do they add? I'm not sure what the money can be used for.
Well, because it doesn't have federal restrictions, it's much more flexible use. So they can be used for either project development activities or sometimes road maintenance and other work. One of the things we heard, and one of the interesting things, as Garrett said, we greatly appreciate some insights we got across the region, is that a number of small communities and rural counties, there's an interest in having some of this money go towards non-federal aid facilities or roads. What that means is that there's this network, of course, as we all know, that only you can put federal funds on. There are also sometimes important county roads or sometimes an important road within a city like Wheatland or Live Oak that's not federal aid. So this is a gesture in that direction to offer some more help to those rural or small communities that just don't have other local dollars and can't really find another way to make those improvements.
Okay, thank you. My final question has to do with the multi-funding round commitments for large transformative projects. And that's a significant departure from, in my understanding, from what we have been previously doing. So the question I have is, how do you anticipate that would play out? And what kind of accountability and a performance-based review of progress would be incorporated? I realize this is brand new, but what do you anticipate? And of course, that takes money off the table for emerging priorities as well, and kind of gives a most favored nation kind of approach for some of these projects. So how do you envision that will work out?
Well, thank you for that very good question. What we definitely heard interest of both having it as wide as possible in terms of eligibility, but the challenge, of course, is making the most with limited budget. And so the reason why we focus on non-expansion projects is really 4 primary areas. One is just that obviously those projects typically aren't quite as expensive and the risks are lower because they're going to be implemented more near term. And as we all know, sometimes with an expansion project with just like a phase like right-of-way and some of the complications that come from such projects, those costs are very hard to forecast until you get through final design. So we have it through for these non-expansion projects. We also believe that by limiting it there is very much in the spirit of the Fix It First priority and our MTP about trying to help system maintenance, these projects that are helping improve the condition of our existing assets. So by having it limited to non-expansion projects, what we see would happen is this. There may be situations where a sponsor may consider applying for a small project, and by small, remember 5 million or less, could be say it's a complete streets, or maybe for Yolo County, we're talking about a farm to market road, right? A small improvement along a county road that they would be seeking funds for. They may decide that rather than taking a small piece of it, let's use an example like County Road 98, where we want to do what we would have had to do in 2 phases. We want to do 5 miles of County Road 98. That means that they would be suddenly above the $5 million threshold. They are a non-expansion project, but that kicks them into the transformative category. So that application has greater scrutiny. There's a little bit more documentation that's needed. They have to, at that scale of project, it's easier to measure the performance benefit because larger projects just generally are. So they would have to go through our rigorous assessment of the project performance assessment. They'd have to have a little bit more documentation in their application than the very short maintenance and modernization application. And from that additional documentation and the consultation phase, we believe we put a lot of attention on I think the risk assessment for project delivery. We'd be paying close attention to how close were they in the past about delivering within the budget they estimated, and how good were they about staying on track. So that would be part of that to get to the staff recommendation that came to you for consideration. We aren't suggesting that this program would not have some cap on the outside, meaning like it might be, we might recommend in that scenario a corridor to get say $7 million or $8 million, but we would also be mindful of the timing, meaning that we recognize that with managing these funds, we need to keep a certain amount of funds in the program projects in the pipeline to maintain good delivery each year. So we would probably be saying this project, we are providing up to say $8 million. We would be providing that. We know that this commitment will extend beyond the 2 years we typically are programming in this funding round, but the final, we can't assure you on cash flow until every year we'll have to check in to look at our delivery and see what we can do with you. But at the same time, there would be a certain kind of ongoing staff monitoring, both through the annual delivery plan, where we'd be looking at how they're spending the funds they got from the early disbursement, as well as how well are they staying on track as they get through later stages of design and making sure that this project doesn't have any complications that are coming along. So we would be flagging it, or we would be reviewing it, of course, at every 2-year increment. We don't anticipate the staff recommendations to be too many projects that would be like 6, 8, 10 years of commitment. But what we've realized is that there are sometimes smart examples, whether it's the County Road 98 example I used for you, or we recognize that the entrepreneurial approach that like an agency like Sacramento County's had to take with some of their complete streets work along a corridor like Fair Oaks Boulevard. So we recognize that there are cases sometimes to try to reduce the amount of needs for phases and segmentation by getting a policy commitment from our board that would extend beyond the 2 years. So we hope to help those urban complete streets, and whether it's our street in the city of Sacramento, Fair Oaks Boulevard in Sacramento County, or County Road 98, we have plenty of examples where we think we can get more efficiency by allowing that agency not to break it into many phases, but maybe just 2 or 3 or none, and then be able to go through the project development process just once, so they're not redoing environmental, not redoing design. So that's our intent here. But the key thing, and you've raised a really good point, we are introducing some new ideas that haven't been done before. So what we are hoping to get with board direction is making sure that if you adopt this framework, our commitment is to continue working with your staff and other stakeholders on the draft guidelines to make sure it balances opportunity with risk management, so that we do as much as possible to make sure we're creating new opportunities, but managing the demand, because these are going to be very unpopular, and managing the risks that, of course, we take if we're going to be making a policy commitment beyond the 2 years of revenue we can promise in this funding round.
Vice Chair Soon.
Thank you, Chair Cabaldon. Matt, thank you and your staff, the rest of your staff for all this. I know it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of complexity in this. I wanted to follow up on the question from Director Saylor about the RUCs, specifically around the RSTP, the Regional Surface Transportation Program funding, which I understand is federal funding that's provided by formula to cities and counties for road maintenance. How are you treating that pot of funds that come formulaic into this program, into this framework?
I'm sorry, Director Soon, make sure I understand the question. You're asking about the RUCS exchange, which was formerly just called the RSTP exchange?
What is that? What? So the RUCS exchange is the RSTP?
Yeah, that's formally, it was called, in prior funding rounds, it was called it's the acronym for the funding source, the Regional Surface Transportation Program, or RSTP exchange.
Yes.
So I use that as an example of road maintenance, but it's not actually it doesn't limit those local agencies spending on road maintenance. It's just that that's where we understand they've been spending those dollars primarily. So the formula is it's the STP formula that the feds send to California, and then they get it to the regions. They allocate to regions. That is the funding source. And I was just using the illustration that because these agencies primarily have road maintenance needs, that they're using that money sometimes to deal with complications that they can't use federal funds on, because the exchange basically takes a federal source of funding and turns it into a local dollar.
So this funding is recategorized in your framework under the RUCS exchange?
Yeah, it's essentially taking that revenue. We'll talk a bit about it in a moment when we can get it, if we shift to the budget. But the point is, it's among the dollars that would otherwise be part of the larger pot, right? So we forecast, of course, the Surface Transportation Program funds that come to from the feds to California and then come to us. We are saying we are looking to have $1 million, the dollar. We already want to continue the existing state, program we do with Caltrans, but we're adding $400,000 of we would call it our managed fund. And our managed fund is basically when we make a loan for a local agency and they pay us back because of the loan in local funds. It bolsters an account, and that $400,000, we would both have the 1.1 million of revenue that the state has washed through their own mechanism, and then 400,000 of SACOG dollars that are washed together for that $1.5 million total.
Okay, thank you. I understand, yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions at this time before we move to the public comments? Director Peters.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to the larger question that brought us to today, which is a proposal by 5 member jurisdictions, all happen to be within the county of Sacramento. And that would be Elk Grove, Galt, Folsom, Citrus Heights, and the county, which is a pretty large amount of residents within the 6-county region that we represent. And we asked, I'm just using we because it was the so-called rogue DOT executive directors that put this forth after many, many hours of work. And it has taken quite a bit of time to get any attention from SACOG. And I think there has been some misunderstandings of what the proposal was. And it's very similar to how Placer and how Placer County distributes RSVP funds, where cities and counties receive funding on a population and road miles basis, mirroring how funds are apportioned to the regions. Other agencies that get substantial funding would get money off the top based on a formula and based on the amount of their historic averages. And then and then there would be 20, and the other thing that's been misunderstood is that out of 100% of funds, 75% would go to the 4 counties and their cities that are within the SACOG group, and then 25% would be left in a fund for all the competitive projects. And perhaps it was, I mean, SACOG always goes to a level of detail, that's for sure, but I haven't really seen a response to why that is a bad idea. And you've got 5 jurisdictions, all whose city council and board of supervisors voted unanimously in favor of this proposal. And honestly, I feel ignored. So I'd really like to hear more about that in the general sense.
Great. Well, I can address her. James, did you want to start? Then I can offer some specifics of what we have documented.
Sure, look, I can certainly start. Director Peters, I can hear your frustration. My opening, well, first of all, as I was trying to articulate up front in this, we did not ignore that proposal. We deliberated, discussed it quite a bit. In attachment C, I know there's a lot of information, a lot in your packet, but there is a very detailed response to a lot of what was in the Public Works proposal. We can go into detail in terms of the engagement, and we thought about it very carefully, and that was why I wanted to lead off this discussion and give you at least our professional advice on the risk inherent in a formula. We have, I can tell you, and I know this maybe is cold comfort for some of your agencies, but we have taken to heart a lot of these things and have tried to step back from the Public Works proposal and think, what is the intent? Simplicity, transparency, and certainty, and we've tried to incorporate it in here. So I understand there's a sense of that. I can tell you we have done a lot of work and some engagement on this, and the proposal in front of you, I think, meets a lot of the intent of that without, as you say, to be very clear, going to a direct formula because of the risks inherent in that I was trying to articulate up front.
Well, maybe, I guess the question is the risks that you articulate the same as the risks we have? We, and I believe all the agencies that are members of SACOG go through a planning process with our DOT where we rank our projects, and we have a 5-year or 7-year spending plan. And yet, we as elected officials cannot really turn around to our constituents and say, yes, you're on the list, you're 3rd after the first 2 get finished, or you're 1st and that's going to happen this year. And I mean, outside of the, discussions about all the other programs, I think we've lost track of how the people who live in our cities and our counties, how they respond to this. They think we aren't responding. I can't tell you how many times a day, a month, a year that I have to try and explain this. And so I felt that, and still feel that there should have been a more direct response. You pulled it all apart and you had comments about it, but I didn't hear, when we've got 2 counties on the SACOG board that are not part of this, Placer and El Dorado have their own transportation agency. they're really here for the planning part of it. Why would not the formulas that they use work in the balance of the counties and cities that are on the board? I mean,
and just a quick response, Director Peters, you mentioned the CIP, right? And the priorities that
right.
Not just your county, but all of the jurisdictions go through.
Right.
And again, I know there's a ton of detail in here, which is why Matt and Garrett wanted to walk through. For the first time, we're suggesting in the Big Fix It First maintenance modernization program to establish that list of priorities. Our goal and our intent there is to say, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's a consultation approach with your public works staff. So here's the number 1 project, here's the number 2, here's the number 3. That's the certainty we're trying to get, which came through the proposal back in May.
And does that mean certainty of funding?
That's what we don't have with no, it does not in terms of a formula, but it gives you a much more clear, I think, and sense of that's number 1 project is our number 1 project to get funded. It stops short of going to a dollars and cents formula for all the reasons I tried to articulate.
Well, I think that's one of the most important elements of the plan that these 5 jurisdictions put forward to you is, absolute certainty, barring, a disaster like we're going through now, of course. But, and I've said before, and Matt used one as an example, we have projects within, I can only speak to my jurisdiction, which is the unincorporated county. We have projects that are costed out to be all built at once that got broke into 3 phases, ended up costing 50% more because of the delay, and then it's 3 times or however many phases it got turned into as much difficulty residents to. What?
I'm sorry, I didn't know if, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, I'm just pointing out that time is money, and we have to have the certainty on that, and we can save money by and not just how much time and money it costs to put an application together and walk through the committee process and all that. It's by doing things in smaller phases. You skip the inflation part of it, and many other uncertainties that come up when anything is done over a long period of time.
And we heard that, and honestly, from the public works discussions, understood that breaking those projects up into small segments, reapplying once we've already funded you, does not make a lot of sense. Which is why in this proposal as well is that idea about multi-year commitments and basically coming in for a project, even if we can only fund you for 1 phase. That a lot of that came out of that public works proposal.
So we're going to return to committee members' discussion in just a bit. I know that the direction to staff from the committee and from the board was not to bring forward a proposal that any particular subset of 5 jurisdictions would endorse. There are, I think we're asking our staff to do too much here, which is answer all the political and policy questions. That's going to be on the board ultimately to decide. And so staff has presented a fairly exhaustive explanation of their own analysis and their own proposals. But that's going to be for our committee and for the other committees and the full board to reconcile. I don't know if we will get to the point where any one of us will be fully satisfied with the staff's representation of their analysis with respect to our own position. There are, I will say, I personally would love to have a formula if the formula was looking ahead and not backwards in the rearview mirror. And it looked at what have we committed to as part of the MTP-SES and the RENA calculations, who's going to be accommodating most of the growth into the future. And that's a different 5 jurisdictions, right? So this is a conversation for us to have as jurisdictions and as board members. I think the staff has tried to thread a bunch of needles here, but they've done the work that they can, and now it's going to be up to us to reconcile once we get our questions answered right now, and then the public comment, and we can return to the committee for its full discussion and deliberation.
I understand that, Christopher, but I felt that staff did thread all the needles, but there's a sewing machine involved, and I'm not sure that, I want to be sure that all of the members of this committee are aware of the bigger issue, and that there was a 5 jurisdiction proposal that was not just from the directors of transportation, but from the council members and board members of those jurisdictions. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And we have one other committee member question. Is Amarjeet on the call?
Thank you, Chair Kabaldin.
There you are. Okay, right in front of me.
Amarjeet Beningpal, Caltrans District 3 Director. Thanks for all the work which has been done, not only by SACOG staff, but also by local jurisdictions to bring this key issue for a debate and a discussion, and then setting the policy direction for the future. So I'm certainly one of the interested party in this. So I'm not going to weigh my opinion one way or the other in terms of the process of selecting, but I wanted to bring two issues forward as we continue to keep debating that what might be the appropriate ways to start addressing at least the special districts, and especially when we're going to be dealing with the transformative mega projects, which are going to take long-term commitments. So my questions are twofold. One is the predictability, and then the second question is going to be along the lines of flexibility and seizing the opportunity. So in the predictability aspect, I wanted to ensure that many of the projects which are the backbone for approving on the MTP SES and meeting the greenhouse gas goals were also very clearly tied to many of the mega infrastructure projects on state highways. And most of these projects are going to take more than one cycle of funding. And I wanted to make sure that those predictabilities are built in as we are going to be venturing, not only from achieving our greenhouse gas goals, but they're also tied to the future revenue sources. Our MTP cannot stand on its feet without having those projects with some consistency in terms of our approach, trying to take them to the finish line. So I wanted to make sure that we are all buying into the vision for the managed lane and network of our SACOG region, and how that's going to be supported and how we're going to implement it, trying to get to the finish line. So that's the one part I wanted to make sure that in our policy discussion that gets addressed. Second part is the flexibility and seizing the opportunity of aspect. As a state, we have access to sometimes a lot of resources, and other cases, very limited access to the resources, especially when it comes to the capacity expansion type project. As a department, we have very limited sources in terms of trying to actually get projects shelf ready. In the last competitive cycle, the one which the commission is going to be acting, California Transportation Commission will be acting on in their December commission meeting. We were working with multi-county, multi-cities jurisdiction, trying to actually put forward a proposal for transformative modernization ITS element project so we can start managing our existing system to its maximum performance. But one of the key components for us to actually be competitive for $20 million investment in this region, we needed a commitment of $800,000 for project development activities. And at this point, as a result of lack of those flexibilities, we missed the opportunity to actually put this region in a competitive basis with the rest of the state. So as we continue to keep debating, we need to at least build some of those key tools for jurisdictions to have access to, and quickly be able to actually respond to those decision-making process, whether that's delegated to individual jurisdictions or whether those are delegated to the executive director for SACOG. So we can at least be able to make those decisions on a very quick basis and trying to actually respond to the opportunities which are going to be presented to this region to be actually competitive, and trying to continue to keep enhancing our economy and equity in this region. So those are the two key points I wanted to at least share at this point, and look forward to the further discussion and a debate on this issue. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, RJ. Director Joyner.
Yeah, through the chair, if it's appropriate at this time, and please tell me if it's not, it's been said a couple of times that Placer County uses formulas. I sit on the PCTPA board. We certainly use targets. We do not use formulas. I see that Mike Lucan, the executive director of PCTPA, is on the line. Would it be appropriate to have him simply speak to that for a moment?
All right. Yes, since that's been raised as a question, Mr. Jessica, can you permit Mr. Lucan to join?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to. Oh. Give me just one moment. You know, I had just seen him on the attendees list, and I no longer see his name listed.
I thought I could hear him for a moment.
Oh.
Mr. Lucan, you're with us, right?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Oh,
we can.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why I can't show you my video, but I'm here, and yeah, just to elaborate on what Director Joyner was saying, we in Placer County we use targets with each of our funding rounds, and so we set a target based upon population, road miles, or a number of other factors to really start our discussion on projects. And then we, similar to SACOG, we ask probably in a more informal, not probably, but in a more informal setting with our public works directors, we ask them first to provide us their top priority. And then we ask them, is their top priority ready for funding? And then based upon that, we work all of our agencies to essentially get as many projects funded with those various funding sources as possible. So, albeit it's a bit more informal, but we had to move away from formulas many years ago because of the FHWA requirements. But we just use a target as a guideline each time we have a funding round, and it works very well for us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lucan, for the clarification. Thanks, Director Joyner. All right, if we don't have any additional questions at this time, Madam Clerk, could you please turn us to the public comments?
Absolutely. I've received 2 written comments that I can read, but also Mr. Tartakia does have his hand up, so I'm going to allow him to speak.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Tartakia, you're on.
Yes, this is Jeff Tartakia. To the Transportation Board, I would appreciate on the, should we say, recommendation for the Appendix C that possibly a better explanation in the transportation to explain what that is referring to, because it was an awfully hard read to figure out how it went back and forth. That's just a comment that for the future, please. The second comment I will offer is dealing with federal funding right now, knowing that Omni Bera made at the Regional Transit Board meeting the last time that there was not a likelihood of transportation coming forward as a bill, so it's just going to be the FAST and the same type of refunding taking place likely in September. So we're not going to see something change until next year in any great likelihood in those aspects of dollar and funding, which is proposed such a restriction on anything that we're looking at planning forward, because we're still looking at the same thing and looking forward. As somebody else mentions that you don't do a great job of forecasting, and 2020 hindsight is always so much better in understanding in helping our decision-making process is servicing as a reminder. And I will also offer, as being the public right now participating in the Arden Arcade, should we say, enhancement project from Cottage Way down to Northrop, I now understand a little better why Sierra Boulevard, which was something that really needs the sidewalks and everything else done, is seeing that, understanding that how so many times these type of things get missed from the public, and also just getting it out to the public that this week is the period of public comment time simply on that project and how the word gets out about what's going on. My basic comment on that area was that so many of the effects come from outsiders that are coming through, because it's those Howell Avenue, Watt Avenue, and Fulton Avenue are such through streets that that don't help for building the community, whereas Bell and Morris are streets that help build within the community when you're looking at a specific stretch and area and period of time. So only the thoughts is, you know, as you go through projects forward, of how you include the details as well as, unfortunately, the larger picture, which is what Sue Peterson suggested about formalization and trying to determine sources of funding. It's incredibly hard, much less getting a project going forward. And as you say, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priorities of what is possible within the next 5, 10 years to do. That's my public comment. As just being somebody listening, reading to what you're doing a much better job of explaining things for the public. Granted, you're simply needing to do this for your members and for your officials. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey. And Madam Clerk, you said we have 2 additional written comments as well?
Yes, we do. Give me one moment here.
Right, and as you're pulling that up, I'll just note again that we have received letters and resolutions from several jurisdictions: the County of Sacramento, the City of Galt, City of Citrus Heights, the City of Elk Grove, I may have already said, and the City of Rancho Cordova, with as well as letters from Valley Vision, the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, and the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Also, we have all of those on record for the committee as well. Madam Clerk?
Yes, this public comment was received from Dan Ellison, a member of the public. Mr. Ellison says, I strongly recommend that the capacity expansion section of the transformative category be eliminated from the 2020 round. The pandemic has completely changed the pattern of traffic and use from that which existed when the transportation agencies developed their projects. When the state removes the stay-at-home public health order, some patterns will return to the previous, but many will be permanently different from the projections and planning on which projects were developed. The award of funds to any capacity expansion projects will likely not meet the transportation needs of the region on the post-COVID pattern. Once the state order has been removed and traffic/use has equilibrated, then capacity expansion could again be included, if indeed these are regional benefiting projects, but no sooner than the 2022 round. The funds allocated to the transformative category could be shifted to non-capacity projects in the transformative category and to the other categories. I support the program being entirely competitive and not to formula allocation, and therefore reject the logic behind the Public Works proposal for formula allocation. Formula allocation often results in projects that don't meet regional needs and often don't even meet the transportation needs of the county or city of which receives formula funds, since the transportation agencies rarely seek community input about priorities. I support the other categories and programs. That concludes Dan Ellison's comment.
Thank you. And next up.
This second comment is from Scott Powell. He says, thank you to everyone on the committee for all of your efforts and time on addressing the transportation funding. My name is Scott Powell, and I am the Senior Vice President for the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, and we feel the current funding model should remain in place. We have submitted a letter to this effect, but wanted to testify before your committee as well. We as a region cannot address economic inequality and opportunity without a strong regional transportation network. We as a region rise and fall together. As we all know, we are facing unprecedented economy times. Large-scale regional transportation programs that can leverage multiple funding sources will help the economy recover and help ensure we continue to transform the regional economy. Thank you for your efforts on helping to advance our region and to continue to focus on large-scale transformational transportation projects. And that concludes his comment.
All right, thank you. Then that concludes all the public comments, written and live. And so thank you to everybody that has submitted comments, and again, thank you to our staff team and all the folks who have partnered and collaborated to try to develop this proposal, and so many of the directors who are in this meeting and who are not on our committee, who have devoted a lot of energy and time in order to resolve this. This is obviously a core topic for SACOG and for our individual jurisdictions, given the times that we're in, but also our own community needs and the regional objectives to which we've committed ourselves. As I mentioned earlier, I've personally been interested in moving our funding systems to better match what our plans are. And in RENA and MTP SCS, as an example, there are a handful of jurisdictions that have committed to carry far more than their prior share into the future, whether that's Rancho Cordova or Yuba City or the City of Sacramento, or of course my own city or others, that a formula that looks backwards at existing population and road miles doesn't account for the fact that those jurisdictions have committed to take on a large proportion, almost a majority of all of the growth in the region through the RENA process, and that our investments in the transportation system have to reflect that. That's the opposite of the five jurisdiction position that we've received. But it is an example of how challenging formulas really can be, because formulas are a way to put us on a form of autopilot. But that autopilot, you have to know both the destination and the altitude and all the other elements, which might be possible in a simpler region or even in a single county. And the notion that Placer or El Dorado or some other county might have had a formula system, the diversity of jurisdictions, the difference between some of the poorest jurisdictions in the region and the biggest and most complicated and some of the richest jurisdictions in the region, which exist in the 4 counties, is very dramatic. And so a one-size-fits-all formula that doesn't capture the richness and frankly, the contest between many of us around those funds is bound to be controversial and divisive. And so although I'd love to see more formula and more certainty around support for putting investments where the growth is actually supposed to happen and where the RENA obligations are, I recognize the challenges of creating a formula that can achieve that sort of consensus from Yuba City to Rancho Cordova to West Sacramento and all around the region, which would be heavily disadvantaged by a formula that has been put on the table to this point. But I think more fundamentally, as we've looked at this over the last several months, and we've learned more about even the legal challenges of the formula that the staff has surfaced and highlighted, because in essence, it's not most of this is not our money. I'm old enough to remember when we didn't program this money. The federal government and the state government did it directly, and it didn't get to many of our jurisdictions at all. And the big flashy projects and the biggest jurisdictions got all the money and all the attention. And the federal government and the state government devolved the authority to program funding, but in order to meet those objectives, the existing state and federal objectives that were out there. And we said, hey, we could do a better job of dealing with air quality issues. We could do a better job of reducing congestion. We could do a better job of advancing complete streets. We could do a better job on climate at the local level if you give us the ability to program these resources regionally in order to accomplish those goals. And all those funds still have most of those strings, but those strings are very adeptly managed by our staff who make it invisible and make it look as though, hey, we have complete control over all this, over billions of dollars that we can allocate however we want to. But that's largely an illusion. Most of those rules are still in place, and we rely on them to match up the funding sources and make everything reconcile at the end of the day in the forms. But we don't have unfettered authority just to allocate funds however we choose to without attention to those requirements and to those rules. And we've seen in other regions across the country that have even played with the idea of a funding formula as a significant way of allocating their funds, that they've run into trouble with the Federal Highways Administration for not complying with the federal rules. And the same thing is true with the climate issues at the state level and with the COP legislation that gave us the Senator COP legislation that gave us the authority to make these allocations. And so the risk involved of risking our entire ability to make those allocations on behalf of the state and federal government, in my judgment, is very significant. And the fact that we don't currently have an approved MTP SES from the state at this point, and that as they're reviewing it, if we were to declare that we were no longer going to program regionally based on our ability to achieve that 19% target, I am very worried and concerned that we would jeopardize the approval of that document. And without approval of that document soon, within the next couple of months, our ability to expend large proportions of our overall state and federal funding will be in jeopardy as well. So it's a very risky moment, in particular, to be taking on the notion of a formula. And then I guess the last thing, hearing the public comment, it was a reminder to me that this is in some sense the hardest time to think about conceptually what a formula would look like, because we don't know what our economy and transportation patterns might look like in a couple of months, and trying to fix in time exactly our prior transportation patterns from 5 years ago or 10 years ago as the future seems like a bit of hubris right now. And although I have ideas about what the future might look like, and we probably on our committee have 18 different ideas, we don't know. And it's a very challenging moment probably an impossible moment for us to settle on. Here's the formula that will serve our region and our individual cities well, given the significant uncertainty around what the economy is going to be looking like in our region going forward. And so if I were writing this myself, this wouldn't be the staff recommendation. There's certainly different things that I would do, maybe radically so, but I really admire the work that's been done, not just by staff, but I'm looking at you, Director Slowey, Director Sander, Director Saylor, Director Harris. I mean, Director Zune, everybody on this call who has spent hours and hours and hours trying to tease out, well, what is possible? Well, what could we do? How could we make this process work better at the agency level? And just the sheer amount of effort that's gone into produce something that is a radical change and provides a great deal of additional certainty to our jurisdictions and more flexibility while preserving both our degrees of freedom to meet the challenges of literally tomorrow, but also to protect us legally against any threats as a result of moving towards something that would violate the federal and state rules. That this is a significant accomplishment, and so I'm supportive of moving forward with the proposal that's before us today. All right, additional comment. Director Slowey, you brought us here, right? Director Slowey is the one who raised this issue initially, and so we really appreciate you leading off the conversation.
Thank you. First of all, kudos not only to all the public works folks who put together that proposal, but also to James, Matt, and Garrett. I mean, a lot of work went into this. And when I brought this up, I didn't expect it to be all puppy dogs and butterflies. We'd all hug and say, great proposal, let's move it forward. I wanted to start a conversation to find out basically what I didn't know. When somebody makes a proposal, I wanted to analyze and see what other options are. And I will say, while it took staff a little while to get there, that C option or the exhibit, to me, answered a lot of my questions, right? It's like, here's what the proposal is, here's why we don't think this will work. But they also pulled some stuff out of it that I think in the long run is a better proposal going forward. I chuckled when Placer County said, well, we don't have a formula, but we have targets. I mean, that is a starting place. That is kind of a formula where people can look at it and say it. So, that was something I didn't realize. And now I'm like, well, should we talk more about that going forward? So at the end of the day, again, I didn't expect this just to be bought into and everybody says it's going to happen. I think James and staff have pulled some good points out. I do think, legally it has to be vetted more. There is some risk there. I mean, there was a case in Chicago where people got slapped. There's a couple of cases ongoing in California. Since it's a, legal matter, I'm not going to get into it here, but and that's what I wanted. I wanted to hear what the various options are. I don't think the conversation's over. I think Christopher made a good point about the MTP not being approved, and is really now the time to be shuffling those eggs and don't know. But I think we've got a better proposal on the table than we had, and I think every time we have these conversations, we get better at trying to understand what the issues are. What Susan said is true. I mean, no jurisdiction is going to get away from the fact that, how do you plan money when you don't know what you have coming in? That's why we're elected. That's what we have to do. In a perfect world, I'd love formulaic if, one, the formula was something everybody could agree to, and two, it made sense. Again, I think the proposal is better than what it was last year. Am I totally satisfied we've concluded this conversation? No. But I also understand there's some risks that I didn't realize from a legal standpoint on the formulaic, where in order for me to say, hey, we've got to go that way, I'd need more information on. We're not going to get it before we have to decide for this year. I get that. But, I expected the conversation to be back and forth. And like I said, I think we've got a better proposal. Is it perfect? No. But I will give credit to staff for not only, pulling some of the things out, but then, addressing what I thought was the real question anyways. why don't you think this would work or that? So with that, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Director Slowy, and Vice Chair Suen.
Thank you, Chair Cabalden. You know, this process continues to evolve, and I too am grateful for staff's work in trying to make things better. I think we all agree that the MTPSCS will be our guiding document going forward. I don't think anyone's contending that, you know, jurisdictions should fund things that would be outside of those of the MTPSCS. You know, we've all heard from implementers, program implementers, you know, i.e. our public works directors, including Elk Grove's, and which, you know, subsequently led to Elk Grove, my city council, supporting the concept put forward by the county. I still am regionally minded, and if that, you know, that regional mindset should include and consider the needs of everybody in the region. And so we heard from our program implementers, and most loudly the county of Sacramento, is there some needs that aren't being met, and there's some improvements that need to be done. And so when I think about that, and then consider risks that why can't we embrace the spirit of Civic Lab? The board went forward with adopting Civic Lab and championed this board as one of innovation, not to be afraid to try things, and if it fails, fail fast. Why can't we take this proposal but add on to it a direction to explore? And we won't call it formula; we'll call it targets, like Placer County. Let's look at the Placer County model about targets for a portion of the funding. You know, perhaps anecdotally, perhaps maybe a 25%. You know, not a 75, but a 25%. But explore and let them try to figure it out over the next couple of weeks. Chair Cabalden, you mentioned that you're for formulaic if it looks forward and not backwards. I'm okay with that too. I mean, let's put it all on the table. Let's let the staff try to figure it out in the next couple of weeks and see if there's something that they can develop to, you know, thread that needle. And if it doesn't work, you know, no harm, no foul. But perhaps if there's something for a small portion of it, again, I'm just throwing out there as an example, 25% or whatever that number is, maybe we've just improved upon this process even more. So I would ask for that consideration from this committee and see if they're willing or open to engage in that, which is essentially, again, I'll repeat, looking at the Placer County model, that's targets, engaging on a small percentage, not 75%, but something less, and whatever that may be, whether it's RENA, whether it's, you know, a combination of things. But let's just see. And if we can do it, then, you know, again, we've invoked the spirit of Civic Lab, and we've tried to have and engage in this conversation. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Suen. And I'm just going through the raised hand function since there's so many of us. And next up is Director Chenier.
Here's raised hand.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cabalden. I appreciate it. I want to add my thanks to James and Matt and Garrett. I was involved in a number of conversations on this, a lot with our own public utilities folks, and then some certainly with SACOG staff. This is a little bit of a balancing act, but I think that, well, I'd say at one point, one of our public works people said, you know, we can live with this compromise. And my response was, this really isn't about compromising. This is about improving the way we do business. And I think that, to reiterate something that James said, we really were able to step back and for my staff, at least, who, you know, were part of the public works people originally, it was about certainty. It was about transparency. It was about streamlining. And so we looked at the goals and said, how can we achieve some of these goals that you all think are important to do your jobs, which is somebody we want, a group we want to support, but at the same time, maintaining our regional flexibility to meet those larger goals that we have. I think this is pivotal for SACOG really in how we do business, and that it's difficult to think of the transportation piece without also thinking of RENA, without also thinking about the MTP SES. All of those things come together, and for us to be able to step back to say, how do we reach these targets in the bigger picture? What does that require? And I think it requires the flexibility that is in this proposal. Clearly, we will over time try to make sure it's better, try to continue to evolve it. But I think at this point, for this round, this gives us a foundation to work with. It gives us something that we can say what works. What I've stressed to our folks over and over again is the communications part, early and often, that I think will make for much better proposals going down the line, better understanding between SACOG and the jurisdictions about what's important to the jurisdictions. I think some of this work will push a little bit more responsibility into the jurisdictions to do their rankings to make sure that everyone understands what's most important. Sometimes that's easier than others, but I think that's an accountability that we all own, representing our jurisdictions. So I'm very much in favor of moving forward with the staff recommendation. Mr. Cabaldon, I don't know if a motion is in order right now or if you would like to get more comments from the board members first. I think you're muted.
You can place the motion in on the table. If it gets a second, we'll certainly, we have a lot of folks that want to ring in on this, so we're nowhere near the conclusion yet, but.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation.
Saylor seconds.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded, and so we'll continue the discussion. So we've heard from Director Suen and Director Chenier. Next up, we have Director Sander, then Director Samayoa, then Director Saylor. And just an invitation for any directors whose last names don't start with a S. You're also welcome to weigh on this as well. So, Director Sander.
I thought that was a requirement of this committee.
I apologize, colleagues. I don't know how well I'll be received. My data connection, for some reason this morning, is extremely slow. So if you're not understanding me or if there's total gaps, someone's going to have to wave or something. You know, I have watched this with great interest, the development of this idea, and I'm sort of focused on, you know, the competitive versus non-competitive award status. And Rancho Cordova passed a resolution saying that we are in favor of a competitive award process. And I want to just sort of talk a little bit about why I think that's important, but also I want to give some credit to the overall discussion here. And that this is talking about the same sort of issues that I've heard for as long as I've been on SACOG and even before, about challenges that we face working together as a region. And that is certainly certainty, which, you know, in a lot of what we do is critical. Transparency, which is probably one of the harder things in my view to gain, but I think the staff proposal is certainly moving in that direction. And then of course, local control. And that's what pulls us all together in organizations like SACOG or the League of Cities or the County Association. We're all in favor of local control. But I'm really focused, I want to focus my comments here on this competitive versus non-competitive awards. And I understand the motivation, I think, behind the proposal that came from transportation staff. Certainly, you know, life would be a lot easier if everything was programmed. Life would be a lot easier if we had total control over what we wanted. Life might be easier if I could easily divide up future dollars into districts that are sitting on my board. That makes a lot of sense, I guess, in a kind of a bureaucratic safety kind of a mode. But what worries me about that is that the driving influence in that case, that sort of bureaucratic interest in simplifying this for those purposes, probably ignores the great expertise and the complications that are involved in that change. So in our region, I would dare say that SACOG has by far the greatest expertise in determining how we position ourselves for SCS funds, related funds, or any other federal or state funding program. I don't think any of us, even the largest agencies, have staff that can compete with the knowledge that we have imbued in SACOG, and we rely upon SACOG to provide to us. Certainly not the small jurisdictions. Unless you're extraordinarily lucky in hiring, you don't have anywhere near the level of expertise that we have at SACOG. So if a proposal is coming from someone who has less expertise to the folks who have more expertise saying, you're wrong, experts, we need to do it a different way because it's easier for us, there's caution flags all over that for me. That is not a good governmental process. It's not a good public process. That's extremely worrisome. And I see comments coming in, from the Sac Metro Chamber or GSAC talking about reliance on data. And I think that is absolutely critical in how we do it. And it's certainly critical, as I understand it, to our region's applications to state and federal programming, that we have good data and good plans that we're sticking with, and we're using metrics to evaluate the sorts of things that a bunch of us on this board may not agree with as priorities. But in a real politics sense, this is the world we're living in California, in the United States. These are the priorities that other agencies, other levels of government have set, that rules and boundaries that we have to live within. And I view it as really risky to sort of thumb our nose at those and say, oh, well, for our own certainty and our own ease of job, we want to bypass that competitive process. I think it's the competitive process that makes us all a lot stronger. Now, there are obviously, because of my opening comments, there's a lot of things we can improve in that competitive process. And I think this engagement between the public works directors and staff has gone a long way towards hopefully opening up some of the transparency, granting more certainty. I particularly like the emphasis on working with jurisdictions over a long period of time and helping them narrow down their projects. I know in some cases, I think jurisdictions have been putting in one application for every member of their governing board or some such metric. We're not cursed with that yet in Rancho Cordova, but like all of us, we probably soon will be. But we ought to be able to move beyond and better, beyond that sort of a priority setting in how we build things. And I think that long-term engagement between staff and SACOG is the way to do that. So I'm completely in support of the staff proposal. I'm very concerned about a loss of our regional competitiveness or even our compliance with mandates that we have to live within. And I think in this process, we can really improve our communications and our transparency and add to certainty. And for those reasons, I think this may have been painful for a lot of people. And a lot of time has been expended here, but this is a good improvement for SACOG, and I want to commend staff on that and my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sander. And Director Semayowa, and then Director Saylor.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I'm not going to say anything new that hasn't been said, other than I do support this proposal brought by staff. I thought staff has done a great job in listening and analyzing and looking at realities and looking at the needs of all of us. And I thought they did a really good job on the work. For me, I really do believe that for us to be able to be successful regionally, we have to work together and continue looking at projects that have the biggest economic and social impacts in our communities, that will have the equitable lift for our communities that have been left behind. And I believe that this proposal is going to help us move in that direction. So I definitely believe that, for my local folks, I know my roads are beat up. We have 2 state highways going through our city. We have a regional hospital that provides services to the region. We have Caltrans District 3 office that provides jobs to a lot of folks in the region. In the county, we have the Air Force Base that, provides a lot of jobs and a lot of transportation needs. We have agricultural goods that need to be delivered to the market, and they go through our town. So we get a lot of the pain of the regional economy that we have. And so, but we have to be part of the answer as well. I do want to kind of pull something that Director Benapal brought up is this, for us, we have a lot of safety issues in our corridor and our circulation. So having some way to have some flexibility that we can go after some dollars available so we can leverage additional dollars that we can bring from somewhere else, I think can be important also. And I think it's there, and I think we can find ways to kind of make those opportunities, leverage some of the opportunities that might come up, especially when it comes to safety and circulations in our communities. But I truly do support this, and thank you for all the work.
Thank you, Director Samayoa. Dr. Saylor.
Thank you. It's times like this when I'm so proud to be a part of this board and a part of this region. The conversation has been deep. There's a lot of integrity that's come through. I think that this is an example of when the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts. Our ability to act as a region is much more important than our ability to have compartmentalized successes within our own jurisdictions. I know you that our staff have applied to Frozen. Am I still being, can you hear me still?
Yeah, you're back.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So I think the value that our staff have applied to this very challenging discussion is one that's based on one of the principles of looking for the underlying interests rather than focus on the positions that they're being expressed. And I think when we can get into deep conversation about the interests and focus our solutions there, we're going to be much stronger. And I think that's what has happened here. The focus that has been discussed of simplicity, transparency, and certainty, I think there's another underlying interest that has found its way into reality with the recommendation before us, and that's their interest of effectiveness in addressing regional goals. And I believe that the proposal that our staff have woven together does meet the three that they've identified, as well as the fourth one, which I think has got to be a critical one for us. I think the simplicity aspect of shorter project applications when it can be done, of considering multiple year project proposals in some situations, I think that's very helpful for the interest that I see that the public works directors and their supporters have brought forward. I also think that the idea of working more carefully in the beginning to clarify the projects, to clarify the priorities of the jurisdictions, and to focus on what the true merits of the projects are and how they might be delivered. I think that's a real improvement in what we've had to date, and I think I'm really excited about this. I think that our staff have turned a conflict into a really positive, constructive set of proposals. I'm a little concerned about the ongoing staff attention and time that the new process points, the new process framework is going to require, and that's something I'd like to think about a little bit more, because there are numerous additional meetings and discussions and back and forth and interviews, and that part becomes, in a way, it's shifting some of the burden of decision making and to our SACOG team. So I want to make sure that we actually have the capacity to fulfill this. But I'm 100% supportive of this improvement, not a compromise. I forget which one it was Jay that said that. I think this is an improvement in our process, and it's going to be one that we will be able to stand the test of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Director Saylor. So we've heard from everyone who had their hands up. Are there any other members of the committee that wish to speak on this item? All right, then we do have the motion that was previously put on the table by Director Chenier and seconded by Director Saylor. So if we've completed all discussion, then
Chair, it looks like Susan Peters has a hand.
Oh, okay, Director Peters, sorry.
I think it takes a while.
Oh, there, I see you now. Yes.
I was interested in Director Suin's proposal and would like to know if I guess anyone else is. And is that, I'm not sure what we're voting on, what has been put in front of us, but is there any interest in adding his thoughts into that?
Well, I welcome other comments, but I think for me, I'm interested in the thrust of what Director Soon's describing, but not necessarily in the timing. The notion of let's look at what how Placer and El Dorado handle their rounds, and what could targets look like, and what might they mean, is worthy of some continued work, and along the lines of what Director Slowey said about this is a major step forward. But that doesn't mean we're going to sit down and stop. But I guess I'm more skeptical, and it's based on part of what Director Sanders said, that doing that within the next 3 weeks before the board meeting and doing it well may not be. I'm skeptical that that's really possible. That we can do both things. That we can do it and do something that would work. We've even this process that's been going on for months with a lot of consultation, a lot of research, has even in the last couple of weeks produced new information that, oh my gosh, it's a good thing we didn't jump the gun 3 weeks ago, because we've just learned more about the Chicago case or other issues that it's certainly worth pursuing, and we ought to do that in a way that is real, but not for the funding round that we're trying to wrap up right now, so that the calls can go out.
Perhaps we could hear from staff on that question and whether they're capable of that. And then I have another request, and that is, it was referred to by one or two people that this is a legal problem, and I would like to have the legal opinion on that forwarded to me so I could look at it and understand it better.
Right, Mr. Corliss, can I turn to you with respect to the? Oh, I thought you were frozen for a second. You're just very stoic.
I'm intent on listening to you, Christopher.
Director Corliss. CEO, Mr. Corliss, on the question of Director Suin's suggestion, do you have a?
Well, okay. I'll take Director Peters' question up first. Director Peters, happy to forward you what we have on this in terms of the Federal Highway Administration. So absolutely. I might look to Matt on our staff in terms of that time frame, and again, I'm trying to understand, listening here intently. It sounds like, Director Soon, you're asking about some sort of consultation target idea, much like you heard from Mike Lucan.
Well,
what you were asking.
Yeah. So letting. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Letting staff. Public Works has already been engaged, right, in this process, as well as Caltrans and other regional organizations. Letting them have that conversation about whether or not they could agree on targets for some smaller portion as a pilot. So
maybe 50%.
Maybe less, but I'm just saying, some small portion that's a pilot, similar to, in the spirit of our civic lab we've always done. See if there's a formula, whether it's RENA, whether it's population, I don't know what it is, but let them see if there's something that they could come up with that they could put forth as a pilot, and see how it goes over this round. In addition, or working together with the current proposal that your staff has already put forward.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Saylor. Maybe there's staff who has a response, but I would not be interested in doing that at this point.
I'd like to hear from staff.
I'd like to finish my comment. I think that we have devoted incredible amount of attention to the underlying interests, and that we've got a proposal before us that I think captures that. There's not much. We've got quite a bit of work to do to get ready for this funding round. I don't believe that the target concept is something I can support in this round. I'm open to deeper thought for the future rounds, but right now I think we've got an opportunity to move forward, and I don't want to undermine that by more what ifs and alternative scenario consideration.
Director Soon, I guess to respond and giving it some thought, just hearing you explain, for all the reasons I articulated up front, again, it's our professional opinion that there's a lot of risk inherent in the formula. I think the pilot is, as I was trying to respond to Director Peters, the pilot is this in the maintenance program project ranking consultation. I think that's a great thing to test. And again, I think we tried to take, as Director Chenier was saying, a lot of the goals, the intent, and the desire for certainty from the public works proposal and to put it in there. I think if we can make that work, that's a consultation process, much like I've been talking to Mike Lucan in Placer County, appreciate his comments. I think that's a good way forward that we have put a lot of thought into. And I think we should try, because I think there's a lot of, it gets to a lot of the certainty requests. I know not all of them, it doesn't get to the money and the dollars and cents, but the certainty request. I think that's our pilot anyway for the cycle that at least we're recommending.
I'd also, if I can, Christopher, say that, I think it'd be important for this committee to come back after the funding round to debrief, which we don't do all the time and we don't do in a timely manner sometimes, to debrief the funding round, how it went. And at that point, provide some direction to staff to look at other things, and Mr. Soon will be at that meeting as well, I assume. And if he wants, or Ms. Peters wants to say these are things that we should look at for ensuing years, then I think we should absolutely do it. We can always get better and try things, but I don't think, and Matt, I'll let you go here, but I don't, from what my understanding is, I don't think we have time. We need to move forward, as Mr. Saylor said, with the current funding round. See how it goes, what we can learn from it, and then keep going from there.
So we have at least 3 challenges to get through. And one of them is the capacity of our staff and everyone else to process this. But I think more fundamentally, that what this conversation has emphasized is that there are 2 fundamental challenges that aren't challenges of degree at the moment. They're just challenges, which is, one is, if you had a formula, what would it be? And there are starkly different formulas that different jurisdictions might support. That's not really a staff level thing to resolve, and it's not something public works can resolve, but there are just different core interests on the table. And some of the issues that Director Sander raised around what it is that you're funding and based on what data. So there you have that challenge, and you have that challenge whether or not the formula is for 25% or for 75%. It's still that battle over what is it. And then secondly, and related, is the concerns about the legality of the formula and its implications for our state and federal funding also is not based on whether it's 50%, 75%, or 25%. It is whether or not that is a legal approach in order to make those allocations. And so it's not just a question of could Garrett and Matt work on this, but it's also, I think, is that we've determined, or it sounds from the discussion that the committee has come to the conclusion that right now those risks are too high. And changing the percentages doesn't really accomplish that in this particular sense. And the pilot notion, as our CEO has identified, is already, that's at the core of what this proposal already is bringing to the table in terms of piloting a new method of accomplishing the fundamental interests and the fundamental goals of the proposal that we had received.
Yeah, then I would just add that as Director Chenier mentioned, a report out of how the allocations end up. I think that'll be good data to use going forward and how well this new concept worked.
I'm happy to add that as direction into the motion.
Thank you very much.
If my second will be there.
All right, Director Saylor's indicating his concurrence.
Concur.
All right. Then with that, let's move to the vote on the modified motion. And Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Harris?
Aye.
Director Joyner?
You're on mute, Paul.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Aye.
Thank you. Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Samayoa,
Aye.
Director Sander,
Aye.
Director Saylor,
Aye.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Slowey.
I'm actually going to abstain, and I need to explain why, because the entire council voted on it. James and staff and others here have convinced me to vote for it, but I will hold off to the board meeting because I need to get the backing of the rest of the council. So not trying to be wishy-washy here. Abstain.
Thank you. Director Veerkamp, I believe is absent. Vice Chair Jennings,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
You know, I need to, Director Slowey, you're giving me pause based on your rationale. Well, I'm gonna invoke that my council has put me here to represent them, and irrespective of the council's decision with this new information, and I'm gonna cast my vote as aye for this round.
Made me look bad.
or vice versa. Vice versa, Jeff.
Jeff, nothing can make you look bad. You're good.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Director Peters. I'm going to abstain also. Mr. Slowey gave me pause because my board voted 5-0 to support the proposal that came in from the staff, our own staff.
All right. Madam Clerk, one more, right?
yes, and Chair Cabaldon.
Aye. All right.
Okay.
So that motion carries. I just want to again acknowledge and express, many directors have said this already, but just this has been a very proud moment to be a part of this committee and this organization, and the substantial disagreements and alternative perspectives and all of that, which we've all been working really hard to reconcile and to put together and to think regionally while still representing our own jurisdictions. But just the quality of the discussion that we've had today and all of the work that I know many of you have been participating in leading up to it has been extraordinary. And I'm really proud to be a part of this committee. And thanks each and every one of you on all sides of the issue for the care and the duty of care that you brought to this discussion. And onward to the board meeting. All right, so we have two information items. Mr. Corliss, let me check in now that it's 12:10. We're going to proceed to those items in an expedited way, or do they speak for themselves? How would you like to proceed?
I am very mindful of the discussion you've just had in the hour. I would look to Matt and Garrett just to say if there's anything, one quick thing to bring board members' attention to. Otherwise, I think we should be respectful of your time. Matt, Garrett.
Yes, I would just point the committee to the table 1 in the item that follows. This is the budget. This is clearly the foundation element for the programming round. Perhaps we could just, if there's any quick clarifying questions, we can offer an answer. There is a good discussion in the staff report, both about the program elements that comprise the budget, as well as what we anticipate to continue working on in the coming weeks before we come back in September with a final recommended budget.
All right. So so this item A will return to us as an action item next month?
That is correct. I mean,
Okay.
It's clearly going to build on the direction, and we really appreciate the direction and support that the board is offering us, the committee is offering us this morning. We value the input that we hope to continue to get from your staff and stakeholders in the coming weeks so that we can come back with a final budget that supports your action you're taking, we anticipate, in August.
All right, great. Well, let me just suggest that members of the committee, while we're still having this item in our mindset, if you have an opportunity to take a look at item 8, if you haven't already, and shoot any questions or comments that you may have to staff as soon as possible so they can begin to incorporate them for the next month's item. And anything on item 9 that's critical? I know we've been putting off this item repeatedly, but anything that we need to take up today?
Chair Cabaldon, there's also the potential for the item on telework as well as the budget to come forward to some discussion at the board meeting in August 20th, since they will not be action items, but they are both works in progress.
All right. Okay, I'm just guessing that the full board meeting will be like our committee meeting in the sense that it may not allow for a whole lot of time for separate consideration either. And so similarly, if members of the committee would review item 9 on their own if they have not already, and provide any feedback or comments to staff as well.
And on your screen, Chair Cabaldon, you see Adrienne Moretz, our staffer here. She had anticipated that this item might get squeezed, and I just want to recognize you. You've recognized Matt and Garrett, the staff in the funding round, but Adrienne, her team, working with a lot of our employers and GSAC on telework, had just been doing great. And I know there's a huge interest in the board on this one as well, across all 6 counties, working very closely with GSAC and Barry Broom, actually even through our mega region partnership with the Bay Area and San Joaquin County. So I want to recognize Adrienne, staff work that you recognized just through the last hour and a half on transportation funding, but Adrienne doing a fantastic job for all of you on telework. I'm sorry this item keeps getting squeezed. I believe it is not about the lack of importance, but what else you have in front of you. So just want to recognize the staff on this one as well.
Great. All right, Adrienne, thank you. Mr. Corliss, thank you. We have no other matters to come before the committee. Then again, thank you. Thanks to everyone. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. We do have someone in the public who has their hand raised for public comment.
Okay, on either 8 or 9. All right, let's go do that.
Okay. It's Mr. Tartagia. I'm going to allow him to talk. And he is unmuted. Oh.
Here we go. Just before you adjourn, is it August 31st or is it September 3rd, the next transportation meeting? Because that is Labor Day weekend. Just wanting clarifying which meeting time is going to be transportation.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, perhaps you can respond separately since that's not part of either item 8 or item 9. So we have no further matters to come before the committee, and so the meeting of the Transportation Committee is adjourned. Thank you all again very much. Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Mm-hmm.